Happy camper right now.
Not right now.
We'll see. We'll see what happens next. Joe, thank you.
Thank you.
Some new information in that biker road rage attack in New York City with court action today for the undercover New York City police detective arrested in the incident. He's set to be arraigned on riot and criminal mischief charges in connection with the brutal beating of a driver after he was chased and dragged out of his SUV by a group of bikers. Now there's word investigators have evidence that the off-duty cop might have actually thrown some punches. Let's get into this now with our legal panel today. Dan Schorr is a former prosecutor, and Heather Hansen is a trial attorney. The cops are not saying a lot about this off-duty detective, Wojciech Brajak, if I've got the name right. But apparently he was riding with this group. He was not on duty, but he is an undercover cop. The explanation that we get from the officers, Dan, is that he actually did go up and punch the window of that SUV after it was stopped. Now, what kind of penalties could he face for that?
Well, he's already facing the criminal mischief and riot criminal charges. He'll also face disciplinary charges at work and maybe losing his job. Remember, we don't even know for sure if he was undercover at the time of the incident. And even if he was, putting that issue aside, NYPD undercover officers are trained that if a violent situation arises, they are supposed to try to extract themselves and or diffuse the situation. So at the end, after this chase, when he's there at the SUV and the bikers are starting to attack the SUV, he can start to say to the others, there's too many people around, it's too public, let's get out of here, the cops are going to come. Try to diffuse the situation instead of contributing to the violence, striking the vehicle as is alleged, maybe even striking the driver, and that will encourage others to be violent. And you're endangering the safety and the lives of the driver, his wife, and the infant.
Heather, can he argue that, oh, I was just sort of play acting in my role as an undercover detective, I didn't know there was a baby in the back seat of that SUV because I couldn't see through the glass?
Absolutely, John. You know, it's really easy to step back and look over the scene and to say, well, he should have done something differently. But remember, these undercover cops are immersed in this world. And as part of that immersion, they have to act consistently with the persona that they've put on. So for him to all of a sudden say, oh, you guys, it's time to back off, probably wouldn't have been consistent with all the work he's done thus far.
But there, you know, the guy, the civilian who stepped in front and sort of ended this confrontation when the SUV was stopped, Dan, he didn't have a gun on him. He didn't have anything. He just said, look, it's enough now. You guys let it go. Couldn't this undercover cop have done the same thing?
Right, and not all the bikers in that group, the motorcyclists, actually contributed to the violence at the end. So this motorcyclist, they're driving for a long time before they get to the SUV. He could have possibly pulled over and alerted authorities. When he got there, he could have tried to defuse the situation. That's his training. And he's also accused of, after the incident, not reporting it and ultimately lying to supervisors about his role in it. So this is a pattern of conduct that's alleged. If it's true, that's very serious, and he'll face criminal charges and maybe lose his job.
I want to take a look at the moment that sort of started this whole thing, and it's almost caught on videotape, but it's when this pack of bikers is surrounding this vehicle on the West Side Highway, and you see that biker right in front of the SUV. Now, he slows down. We have a still frame here. Yeah, we're going to play it again so you can see him. He's quite obviously slowing down in front of the SUV. Here is the moment just before impact. The SUV obviously then goes on to bump his tire. Now, that moment of it was not caught on video because the guy who's shooting the video is actually driving past at this point. But Heather, you know, when I took driver's ed and everything else, you always learn that if you're the vehicle in the rear, you're almost always going to be charged if you rear-end somebody in front of you. Is that the case here?
Well, he has not been charged, and I don't anticipate that he will be charged, John. The way that was set up, it doesn't look as though he really had the option to brake, and that's why he's not been charged with any crime thus far. Now, there's more investigation going on, more video has been obtained, and so you may still see charges against him. There will certainly be a civil count for the biker who he ran over, but I don't think you'll see criminal charges for him not stopping because I don't think he had the opportunity to stop, and that tape is the best evidence of that. Yeah. But for that tape, I think he'd be charged.
And, you know, Dan, if I'm the SUV driver and I'm, you know, the West Side Highway, for people who don't know it, it's the closest thing there is to sort of an interstate in New York, in Manhattan. People do 50, I mean, I think the speed limit is 50. People do 65, 70 miles an hour down that road. If I'm driving that SUV and I'm suddenly surrounded by a swarm, and there are a couple of dozen of these guys on bikes, Who knows if he was even looking out the front? He might have been looking, at his side mirrors, in the rear view. Who knows?
Right, and the allegations are after this happened, they are surrounding his vehicle, they're striking the vehicle, and they're puncturing his tires, and that's what led him to drive off. And the legal question is whether he reasonably believed that there was an imminent threat of physical injury to himself, his wife, or his toddler. Based on what we know, it's reasonable that he would have thought that he was going to be hurt or his family was going to be hurt. Ultimately, that's the legal question that police have to look at, and so far he has not been charged.
Heather, it sure looks to me like that guy in front who claims that he was just slowing down to look things over. It looks to me like he was trying to intimidate the driver and maybe even trying to cause the accident, which resulted.
I agree with you completely. I think that what's called brake checking. And I think that ultimately, if a civil case is brought against the driver of the SUV, I would most definitely join these bikers, and especially Cruz, who's that person who did the brake checking, because he started this ball rolling. None of this would have happened had he not pulled in front of the SUV and done that brake checking.
Right, because after he got bumped and his bike went over, that's when the other bikers started, puncturing the SUV's tires and all of that.
Right.
Alexian Lean, the guy who was driving, takes off, runs over the biker, and the whole mayhem starts from there. All right, Heather Hansen, Dan Schorr, we thank you both. We're going to continue to watch this case. It's a strange one. Thanks.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
It certainly is. And new things that come out every day on it.
Yeah, 6 people arrested so far, and a couple of cops involved, apparently.
We'll continue to watch that story. In the meantime, I want to show you this. An historic bridge coming down today. Whoa, look at that, right? We're going to show you where this is all happening. And near